What's up, my fellow Shield Bros, and welcome back for another weekly dose of history. I'm Shield Bro 6 for the History Armada, and today we are talking about an event that occurred on this day, Tuesday, September the 22nd of 1761. We are talking about the coronation of King George III of Great Britain. We will be covering the coronation of George III and his wife Charlotte as King and Queen of Great Britain and Ireland that took place at Westminster Abbey, London on this day. We will also be talking about the background of the coronation, the procession of the coronation, a little bit about the service, and then the reign of King George III and why I consider him to be so important. So as I mentioned, he and his wife were crowned at Westminster Abbey after a long procession from St. James's Palace, where they were crowned King and Queen of Great Britain and Ireland. So let us discuss the background of the coronation. So on the death of his grandfather George II, George ascended to the throne on October 25th, 1760 at the age of 22, which is younger than I am now. The young king was yet to be married, and so he inquired his tutor and mentor, Lord Bute, for a suitable Protestant German princess to be his wife and consort. In July of 1761, it was decided that the king would marry the 17-year-old Princess Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz, whom lacked interest in political affairs, which was much to George's favor. After she arrived at St. James's Palace, accompanied by her brother, Duke Adolphus Frederick, on the 8th of September 1761, to meet the king, George and Charlotte were quickly married at the Chapel Royal of St. James's Palace the same day. They were married just in time for the coronation ceremony 2 weeks later. The coronation was budgeted at around £70,000, with preparations conducted as per tradition by the Earl Marshal, at the time being Charles Howard, the 11th Duke of Norfolk. So, the grandfather dies, George II. He finds a worthy Protestant bride, they marry, and they are to become king and queen. So let us talk about the actual procession on the way to the coronation. The coronation proved to be an anticipated affair, as can be expected of a king and queen becoming, the ruling monarchs of their kingdom. And the morning of the ceremony was marked with crowded streets as well as overflowing inns, rooms, and homes waiting for the appearance of their new king and queen. Reportedly, there was many carriages that arrived hastily to Westminster Abbey on the day of the coronation to find a spot for the nobles, and many of them collided with each other, ensuing chaos. And I don't know, but the idea of a horse-drawn carriage pileup is just really humorous to me. And I love the idea that they were in such a rush that their horse-drawn carriages got into a big fender bender, causing chaos. At around 9 a.m., George and Charlotte departed from St. James's Palace and were carried separately to Westminster Hall in sedan chairs, whilst invited nobility then followed behind them, as you can see depicted here, and so on and so forth, with government officials as well as members of the royal household, which formed a large procession to take their places in the abbey, and it lasted several hours for the procession to start and then finish. The king and queen soon arrived and entered the abbey at around 1:30 p.m. on September 22nd. And they entered with all the dignity, all the pomp and circumstance that is to be expected of the royal couple, and the reverent attention which paid to the service being favorably commented on by the other nobles. That was a quote, after all, quote, reverent attention which both paid to the service. The procession and ceremony were so long that the king was not crowned until 3:30 that afternoon, so it took a full 3 hours of the earl and the priests talking before the king actually became officially king. After the procession, there was the service, as I mentioned. The coronation ceremony was conducted by the Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Secker, in which he guided King George in taking the coronation oath, and he was crowned King of Great Britain and Ireland, followed by the cheering of the congregation and the amassed nobles. The king was then anointed with holy oil, and the king felt it not appropriate to wear his crown during taking of communion, so he took it off. But that's when something strange happened. As he laid his crown aside, it was reported that a jewel fell from his crown, and it was perceived a bad omen. Although this account is disputed, I find that very interesting, as he is the king that is blamed for the loss of the Americas, as well as several other events during his reign. So after the conclusion of the king's crowning ceremony, Queen Charlotte was crowned in a much shorter and much simpler ceremony, and the queen's crown was specifically made for her, which was a precedent that would be followed from then on, from consorts Queen Adelaide in her 1831 coronation, all the way to the Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, in her 1937 coronation. So she set the precedent that the crowns would be made for the queens. Her crown's jewels were said to be gifts from her Hanoverian family, her German family. However, it itself did not survive to contemporary times. Their son, George IV, would have them incorporated in the insignia of the Order of St. Patrick, however. And then after that, there was the sermon, the congregation ate snacks, and then they drank, and then everything was given out to servants, and everyone went on to the coronation banquet afterwards. So that's enough about the actual coronation. Let us talk about George's reign and why I consider him to be an important monarch. So King George III reigned as King of Great Britain and Ireland from 1761 to 1820. The two countries were merged into the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland on January 1st, 1821, so right before the coronation, months before. And in addition to this, George was the elector king of the German princely state of Hanover from 1814 until 1820, though he never actually visited that territory. The early years of his reign saw the victory of Great Britain in the 7 Years' War over the French, as they won what the Americans call the French and Indian War, and Britain became the dominant power in Europe, Africa, and America. Arguably, America had Spain too, but you get the point. They were a kind of proto-world power. The success of this, however, is kind of offset by the loss of the American colonies after the Declaration of Independence in 1776 and the subsequent Revolutionary War. That's right, King George III is the same monarch that the Americans fought the Revolutionary War against. And that's one of the reasons I think he is so important. This has kind of marred his reputation, as he is considered to be the king who lost the colonies and lost the Americas. Which is quite interesting, seeing how so many other events happened during his reign, such as the Napoleonic Wars. He was king during the wars with Napoleon in Europe, and he was even king in 1815 when Britain's forces in Europe under Arthur Wesley, or as you might know him, the Duke of Wellington, defeated Napoleon Bonaparte at the Battle of Waterloo. In the later years of George III's reign, however, it was marked by increasing mental illness. So there was considerable wars fought during this time, and wins and losses going to him, but ultimately he would suffer from a great deal of mental and physical illness, the nature of which has never been fully explained or given concrete evidence. It might have been bipolar disorder, or it might have been the disease called porphyria, but we're, like I said, not concrete in that. In 1811, his son and successor George IV, Prince of Wales, began a 9-year tenure as regent after the illness of his father relapsed and became permanent. By the time the regency was established, George III was almost completely blind. He suffered rheumatism and bouts of depression and crying, a chronic cough, as described by his nurse, and he later developed dementia. So it's kind of just like bad thing after bad thing with his mental and physical health. And he later developed dementia, like I said, and his last Christmas, he spoke nothing but nonsense for 54 straight hours. He died shortly after, finally passing away on January 20th, 1820. George III's historical reputation has undergone changes over the years, going from tyrant to, kind ruler to sick man. His reputation has changed over the years. In his lifetime, however, he was considered a tyrant by especially the American colonies. and is primarily remembered in the UK, supposedly, as the king who lost the colonies, having lost the American Revolution. So you can see here pictured the colonies pulling down a statue of him on the left, and then a political cartoon about him and his embezzlement and the national debt on the right. So that being said, I just find it very important and very interesting, as an American especially, how King George III handled such significant events, such as the 7 Years' War, which was a war fought on many different continents, on almost the entire world, the American Revolution, the War of 1812, the Napoleonic Wars, and he is the monarch that controlled a great power during those times, and it's very interesting to see how his reign started and ended, and what kind of man he was. I might do a different video at some point, really diving into the characteristics and life of George III if there's interest in that, but that's why I did this video, because today is the day that marked the start of his reign, and I find him to be an important monarch because of his lasting effects on world history and American history. That being said, thank you so much to everyone that stopped by. I hope you learned something about the coronation of King George III, and maybe a little bit about his reign and life. I hope you did. If you enjoyed this content, please consider hitting the like and the subscribe button. Lets me know what you guys are enjoying and helps me get my content out there. Additionally, if you want to support me, check out the description of the video. And if you have a comment, suggestion, or concern, leave that for me down below in the comment section. So, thank you again for watching. This has been the video about King George III's coronation of Great Britain and Ireland. I'm Shieldbro6 for the History Armada, and I'll catch y'all next time.